What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video on the Fearlessnick YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going through and grading every AFL team's 2022 AFL season. So if you go on to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. Like I said, I'm so close to 350 subs now. I think I've passed the 340 mark, and I'm on my way to 350 and eventually 400. So if you haven't hit that big red button down below yet, it would mean the absolute world if you could do so right now. But anyways, without any further ado, let's get stuck into it. So as you can see right now, we are going to be doing this on tier maker. So we go through the tiers very, very quickly. We've got A plus up the top. We've got A, we've got B plus, B, C plus, C, D, and F. So it's starting off obviously with the Adelaide Crows. Now the Crows, I believe, finished 14th on the ladder. See, the Crows, they have a very inexperienced young list. They're trying to make a climb up the ladder, and so far it looks like it's going into quite decent effect. Finishing 14th isn't the worst position possible. I don't think they could really go much higher than a C. I think just because, 14th, it's 14th is 14th. You can't really grade that too highly. So, but I think I'm also taking into account what the expectations were for the Crows. I think a lot of people had them about 17th or 16th. I had them 16th. They didn't finish in the bottom four, so that's a good start. Obviously they're trying to climb up the ladder, like I said, really quickly. Their young talent is great. Exciting times ahead for Crows fans. So I think I'm going to give them a C, just because 14th is not the best position on the ladder, obviously, but for where Adelaide are at as a club, it's a good start. Next up, we've got the Brisbane Lions. Now, they obviously finished 6th on the ladder. They missed out on top 4 this year, especially in the second half of the year. It didn't look like Brisbane were that team they had been over the last couple of years. They sort of looked like they were about to fall off, but yeah, fair play to the Lions. They bounced back pretty comfortably. They got 2 massive finals wins. On the basis of that, they're probably around this range. I think I'm going to give them a B plus, just because of that finals run at the end of the year. They looked like they sort of got it together at the right time. I think they still had a pretty solid season. They still won 2 finals, so I think I'm going to give the Lions a B plus for their season. Next up, we got Carlton. Now, this could divide a lot of opinion here with this one. Obviously, the Blues, very unlucky to miss out on the finals. Obviously, they had a very, very tough run with injury. They obviously had some pretty good wins over some quality sides, Rio and Sydney. But then again, they were just a little bit too inconsistent to make the finals, and ultimately they missed out by, I think, 0.6%. Yeah, it was a heartbreaking way to finish for the Blues. If they had made finals, probably would have been about a B or a B plus, but because they didn't make finals, and I know it was unlucky, but I think I'm going to have to give the Blues a C plus here. They didn't make finals. They were expected to make finals, but they didn't make finals. Ultimately, it was very, very close, like I said, but unfortunately, you just got to go what the ladder tells you. I think I'm going to have to give the Blues a C plus. Unfortunately, couldn't get the finals this year. I think they will probably crack it next year. They should crack it next year. Carlton get a C plus for me. The Blues, a pretty solid season. Next up, we got Collingwood, and for me, this is a no-brainer. They finished 17th in 2021, and obviously made the prelim final, and were 1 point away from a grand final. Collingwood for me, they have to be an A. It just seemed like they all clicked under Craig McRae. Maybe the game plan all came. Probably, in my opinion, probably the most resilient side in the comp this year by far. And I think for me, Collingwood, they have to be an A. Just because of how well they performed throughout the year. And I'm going to be giving Collingwood an A. We move over to the other side of the ladder now. We've got the Bombers. The dismal Bombers of 2022. Obviously, the Bombers, they were expected to make the finals this year. I even had them potentially winning a final and breaking that curse. Obviously, that did not happen, and they fell all the way to 15th, which is very, very disappointing because it looked like last year they were building towards something, and this year, I don't know what happened. It just maybe just didn't click. Maybe the players weren't fully buying into what Ben Rutten was teaching them. But obviously they got a new coach now in Brad Scott. Be interesting to see how they play under him next season. Considering they were expected to make finals and they went absolutely nowhere near it this year. But for me, I think they get an F, the Bombers, because they just weren't quite there this year. The Bombers, they just never really seemed to, all click together, get the games on their terms. They dropped. They conceded way too many goals. Their defence was pretty poor. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the Bombers next year. I think they're going to be a team to watch next year, whether they stagnate under Brad Scott or they finally start to rise up the ladder again. But for me, the Bombers get an F just because they were expected to make finals and they were nowhere near it this year, to be completely honest. Next, we move on to Flagmantle or Fremantle. The Dockers, they were pretty exceptional at the start of the year. They probably couldn't have gone any better at the start of the year. The Dockers, it was great to see the Dockers finally get a really good season. Obviously after a couple of really not so great years down the bottom of the ladder, and now it looks like their young group is finally starting to come together and starting to produce some really good footy. For me, the Dockers, I think I'm going to give them a B+, because obviously they went from 11th to 5th this year and obviously won a final. So that's a huge, that'll give them great motivation going into next season. They've just got such a great young group, Freo, and like I said, it was great to see them bring it all together this year. Next up, we've got the reigning premiers in the Geelong Cats. Obviously, had a bit of a rocky start to the year, but after that, they were definitely the best team in the comp and obviously won the flag this year. So for me, Geelong, they get an A+. They're going to be the only team that's going to be getting an A+ in this video. They were far and away the best side in the second half of the year. Geelong, they went on, I think, a 15 or 14 game winning streak at the end of the year, which still hasn't been broken. Let's see if they can chase Melbourne's, which I think was 17 games. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Geelong next year. Obviously, Joel Selwood's officially announced his retirement. Who's going to be their next captain? Everything came together at the end of the year. I think their youngsters took the next step. They changed their game plan pretty significantly to 2021. They were a completely different side this year when going forward and attacking. They weren't as predictable as they were in 2021. And you can't really ask for much more than a flag, can you? So the Cats, they get an A+. So next up, we've got the Gold Coast Suns. They did end up finishing 12th, which isn't their best season ever, but probably it was very, very close. I think the highest they ever finished was, I believe, 11th. I have massive raps on Gold Coast. I think they are a very, very good young side. Obviously, they broke my heart when Richmond played them, obviously, but they took some significant steps this year. Gold Coast, obviously, they definitely are now probably starting to enter the window where they're probably looking to make top 8 now. I think, with that young list, obviously they're going to get Ben King back next year. They're going to lose Isaac Rankin, but I think they showed a couple times this year that they were able to find avenues to goal without Ben King. Obviously, Marvia Chol stood up, Levi Casbolt stood up. They were just an exciting team to watch, Gold Coast, and it's good to see some of these other sides outside of Victoria, like Gold Coast and Freo, do well after a few probably poorer seasons than they would have liked. Again, one of the youngest sides in the comp. This has been building for a while, Gold Coast. I think they really need it this year, just to give them a bit hope and maybe motivation that they can potentially make the top 8. Maybe I don't think they'll make it this next year, but I think 2024, I think they're poised to make the finals. But considering some of the wins they had this year, obviously they beat Sydney in Sydney, they beat Freo. I'm actually going to give the Suns a C+, I think, for their season. I think in terms of expectation, they smashed that out of the park. A lot of people were expecting them to be bottom 4 again this season. A couple of people had them outside the bottom 4. I obviously had them last, so they shocked us. So I think C+ is fair for Gold Coast. I think they've got a really, really bright future ahead of them. Next up, we've got the GWS Giants. They had a pretty shocking season, if you ask me. A lot of people had them. Expectation-wise, they were expected to at least make the top 8. Some people even had them smoky for top 4. Like I've said a million times, I didn't jump on that bandwagon. I thought they were a bit of a fraud side. I don't know what happened with the Giants this year. Obviously, Leon Cameron did depart the club, and this off-season they look like they're about to lose some pretty quality players in Taranto, Hopper, Bobby Hill, Tanner Braun as well. It just doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of light at the end of the tunnel for the Giants, at least for the next couple of years, because they look like they're going to have to go into another rebuild. Yeah, I think considering the expectation that was on them, I think they have to get an F as well, the Giants. They just never got it together, really. They felt like they were just going around in circles, the Giants. They weren't making any progress under McVeigh. They couldn't quite string together the form they had last year, and they actually dropped a lot of those games that they upset last year. And yeah, they just look nowhere near it when compared to the top 8. But the Giants, for me, get an F. Next up, we've got Hawthorne. Now, obviously, the Hawks, at the start of the year, they were really getting hyped up, weren't they? I think they had a tremendous start to the year. Obviously, starting 2-0. Everyone, after I think they smashed Port Adelaide back in round 2. Everyone was like hyping them up and getting on the train. Maybe Hawthorne could actually be alright this season. Obviously, they did fall away at the end of the year. They sort of didn't go anywhere the second half of the year. They were sort of just in and around the pack a little bit, the Hawks. And then I think after about round 10, I think everyone really just stopped talking about them. It's a C or D, depending on what you're rating Hawthorne. That start of the year, though, almost makes me put them up to a C. In fact, we'll give them a C, Hawthorne. I think if I'm going to give Adelaide a C, I think I've got to give Hawthorne a C as well. Just because, the expectation on the Hawks was they would finish bottom 4 as well. And obviously they avoided that. I think they finished 13th. But yeah, the Hawks get a C for me. Next up, we've got last year's premiers, the Melbourne Football Club. They obviously started the year 10-0. They were probably the best team. They were definitely the best team after 10 rounds. Obviously being unbeaten before they lost 3 in a row to Freo, Collingwood and Sydney. I think maybe we all predict that Melbourne would just, get on that roll like they did last season and just cruise through and at least make a grand final or a prelim. They did neither and actually went out in straight sets despite finishing second. Yeah, the D's, they're a bit of an interesting one. I think obviously we all expected them. Obviously they still made top 4. They finished second. But yeah, they had a rocky end to the year. The D's, obviously they probably had one of the hardest fixtures. But actually I don't think they're going to be a B+ because they went out in straight set. I'm going to give them a B. I think I'm going to give the D's a B just because, they just didn't quite get it together, the D's, like they did last year. The D's get a B for me. Next up, we got the reigning Wooden Spooners in North Melbourne, who obviously only got 2 wins this year against West Coast and Richmond. I think they were always going to finish bottom 4. I think that was always a given. But I honestly didn't think they were going to be this bad. I think they were even worse than last year. I'll be a bit nice and put North Melbourne in the D because they weren't really expected to do anything spectacular like Essendon and GWS because, North, they're still a young side. They're still in the middle of a rebuild. And yeah, they really struggled to find really any momentum this year, North Melbourne under David Noble. And then Lee Adams took over after I think it was like the middle part of the year. North, obviously finishing last, but then again, like I said, the low expectation is what puts them out of F for me. Next up, we've got Port Adelaide. Now, this will be a very interesting one because obviously I started the year 0-5 and then sort of got it together a little bit, but also kind of didn't. They were sort of a bit inconsistent this year. They just didn't quite click together this year. They obviously were expected to make top 4 during this season. After about round 3, I don't think they were going to make top 4. I think after they lost that game to Adelaide in round 3, I didn't think they were going to make top 4. Considering the expectation, I might almost put them in the D because they, like I said, were expected to make top 4, and when you don't even make finals after being expected to make top 4, you probably drop a few rankings, in my opinion. I'm going to chuck Port Adelaide in the D. I'm sorry, Port Adelaide fans, but considering the expectation that was on you this year, to not even make the 8, I think is very, very frustrating. And I think next year will be Ken Hinkley's last year, so they want to jump back into the 8 next year, Port, but Port Adelaide for me, I think they get a D. Next up, we've got Richmond, and for me, I think I'm going to give Richmond a B, I think, because obviously I was a Richmond fan, we were very inconsistent at parts this year. We only just secured the finals, being in round 22. But I thought we played really well for the majority of this year. Obviously, we dropped a few more games than we probably would have liked. We dropped some very winnable games against Gold Coast, Sydney, and North Melbourne. We probably could have almost been top 4 if we had won those games. And I think at times we did look like a top 4 side when we played our best footy, didn't win a final, and went out in week 1. So I think I'm going to put Richmond in the B. We got the Saints, and for me, I think they get a C. I'm going to change it. I'm going to give the Saints a C+, I think, just because they had a couple of standout victories against Richmond, Freo, and Carlton. So they weren't terrible, the Saints. They started the year really well, like I said. It sort of dropped off at the end of the year. I think the Saints' best footy is really good, and I think it's probably top 8 worthy, but Blues, they were just a little bit too inconsistent this year, the Saints, to make finals, and I think for this year, I think they get a C. Next up, we've got the gallant runners-up in the Sydney Swans. They made it all the way through to the grand final just to get smashed by Geelong by 81 points. But I think considering they made top 4, they won 2 finals, 2 really big finals against Melbourne and Collingwood. I think they have to get an A because, they made the grand final with such a young list as well. I think they've got a really, really well-balanced list, the Swans, and I think they're poised to do some really great things down the line. The Swans get an A for me for their 2022 season. Next up, we got the West Coast Eagles. They were, not great. West Coast, they were not great. The Eagles, where they are there anymore. I think their list is not quite there anymore. But for me, grading their season, they finished second last. Give them a D. I think I'm going to give them a D because they weren't expected to make finals this year. Obviously, they're going to have to rebuild. And last but not least, we've got the Western Bulldogs. They did finish 8th on the ladder. They scraped into the 8 by 0.6%. They were fairly inconsistent as well this year. The Bulldogs, they had a lot of up and downs. They would beat a really good side like Melbourne or Sydney, but then they'd lose to teams like Adelaide and Port Adelaide. Look, they made finals, but I think I'm going to have to give them a C+, because they didn't do anything spectacular this year, the Dogs. They're a bit like St Kilda, I think, because obviously I think we can probably all agree that Carlton were better than the Bulldogs this year, and the Blues probably deserved to make finals. Didn't win a final either, the Dogs, and they dropped off significantly from last year. They couldn't get that play style that they did last year going consistently this year. So I'm going to be giving the Dogs a C+ for their 2022. So there we go, guys. That was me ranking every AFL team's 2022 AFL season. Comment down below how you think your team went. Did I get any right or did I get any wrong? Let me know down below in the comments. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Remember to leave a like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. I've taken a little break from YouTube. I just got back from Gold Coast. Yeah, I will be uploading hopefully consistently up until maybe December, and then I'll start breaking off in December, and then I'll resume probably January or February next year. From now up until December, I can get some pretty consistent content out up until then. But thank you so much for all your support. Remember to leave a like, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!